Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs, the podcast for burned out, career-minded moms who are ready to stop pretending everything's fine and feel like themselves again. I'm your host, Christy Gamir, burnout coach for moms, licensed therapist, and mom of two. And I'm here to help you reclaim your energy, your identity, and your peace of mind. Whether you're lying awake thinking about the 87 things you didn't get done, or silently resenting the people you love most, this is your space to feel seen, supported, and not so alone. So grab your coffee, hot, cold, or day old, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Christy. Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Ali Damron. Ali is a neuroplastic symptom practitioner, hormone expert, acupuncturist, and personal trainer who helps women balance hormones and reclaim their vitality. Through her virtual practice, podcasts, and courses, she empowers women to improve their moods, sleep, energy, and periods by addressing the powerful link between stress, the nervous system, and physical health. So I have invited Ali here today. She's going to share a bit about her personal story and also to help us better understand the connection between hormone imbalance with stress and burnout. So she's going to talk about some nervous system regulation tools and also some practical strategies that busy moms can use daily to feel more like themselves again. So Ali, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Yes, I'm so glad that you are able to chat. So I feel like you are just going to be able to provide so much valuable information, and I just am so excited to dive in. So do you mind maybe just by starting off and telling us a little bit about, yourself, your story, and how you got into this work?
Yeah, absolutely. So long story short, I feel like I grew up in a small town in western Nebraska. Health was not really something that we talked about. I lost my dad when I was 19 years old and really watched some hard health things, and so started to wonder if there was something we could do for preventative health, eating, exercise, holistic health, like any of that stuff. And I was not exposed to any of that. And so I went to some acupuncturists and I found they were the healthiest looking people I've ever seen. And so I was like, well, I must be onto something. So I went to acupuncture school eventually and did that for a while. And love acupuncture still. I don't do it anymore because after I wanted to have a virtual business with the kids were little. And then after COVID happened, my schedule just kind of filled. I was already doing it 50-50 virtual and in office. And so I've actually just never gone back to in office since COVID. And so I've done everything virtual since then. I do a lot of work on, like you said, hormones, nervous system regulation, digestion, thyroid, all of that stuff. But I also, grew up as a very anxious child. My nervous system, now that I know all of this, has always been kind of on high alert, a little bit more hyper vigilant. Like I said, when I lost my dad at 19, several other events happened in that time of my life as well. And that certainly did not help that cause. And then I had kids. Again, didn't really know so much about this work at that point. I was an acupuncturist, but, didn't really understand how to manage stress, how to work on my nervous system, what that might look like. And so I had chronic back pain, and that led me down this road, which I think we're going to talk about today, of neuroplastic symptoms. I actually, currently am in another season. I lost my mom about 7 weeks ago. And so I'm kind of finding myself back in that state of having to work through the very tools that I teach my patients all the time of just, we'll talk about what they are, but allowing, accepting, processing the emotions, all of that stuff. And so I find myself again in a little bit more of an acute place where, again, I am doing everything that we're going to talk about today, I think.
Oh my gosh. Well, for starters, I'm so sorry to hear about your mom. Oh my gosh. I had no idea that that's what you were going to share today. But I'm glad that it sounds like a lot of the skills and strategies and tools that you've already been practicing and known for all this time, it sounds like they've really been helping you a lot through this period.
It's really, really interesting because I went through it first when I was 19 and now I'm 41. a whole life of differences. And so it's very interesting to walk this road again and see, the similarities, but the vast differences too.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm sure. Well, and
Yeah.
before we get into, like you said, we're going to be talking about these things, but before we do, you mentioned, when you had kids. Can I ask how old are your kids now? Like what season of
Uh,
motherhood are you in?
yeah. So my oldest is 13 and my youngest is 10.
Okay, okay. So so you have been through, I'm sure, a lot of stress and a lot of challenging times. Obviously every season with our kids is different, but with
Totally.
pros, cons, everything in between. Um, can you maybe
Mhm.
talk about a time when you personally experienced burnout as a working
Oh my God.
mom?
Yes. So I think, and I know you speak a lot to high achieving moms. I think, whether you're an entrepreneur or just have a really high stress job, whatever that might be, and then raising kids, I think is just a perfect recipe for burnout. I think I've experienced this a few different times, but when my kids were little, again, I was an acupuncturist and was exposed to a world of health where and we talk about this, if things get really scary, like they're like, okay, all these chemicals and additives, and you have to make these perfect decisions for your kids and how you raise them and attachment parenting and, all the different things. And so I actually felt like that was a really pivotal time in my own journey through parenthood, but also in my own nervous system because I realized that I was parenting solely from a place of fear. And it was
Mhm.
from trying to make the best decisions. But I tell my patients this now, no matter where you are in life, that internal pressure that we put on ourselves is really, in my opinion, like one of the biggest recipes for burnout and disaster. And I just think, as being a mom in general, there's just no shortage of that pressure. Um, I think previous generations probably felt it too, but I think it's so much worse now with so much access to information of
Mhm.
how you should do every single thing, how you should parent, how you should feed your children, how they should sleep, what activities. And there's just so much information. And I feel like constantly as a mom, still bombarded with this pressure to like do it right.
Yes, yes. No, absolutely. And then on top of that, you're talking about all the information that's available, but we also have, social media, people are constantly talking about and posting about, the things that they're doing and
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
comparison piece. And I think that
Yeah.
that can be a little
All of it.
tricky. I think a lot of times, moms, they really want to be helpful to other moms, but I think a lot of times it's also kind of validating for themselves, like, "These are the choices that I made, and they felt really good for me?" And so but
Yeah.
then you've got people who are seeing those things who are maybe choosing to do things a little bit differently, and I think that just sort of feeds into this pressure and this question of, like, "Am I doing it right?" Because like you said, we all seem to have this idea that we and the pressure that we have to do things, quote, unquote, "the right way," whatever that means, whatever that looks like, and,
Mhm.
of course, it's gonna be,
Yeah.
different for everybody.
Different. Yeah. And I do think, in our society in all of these areas, I think people like this like line in the sand of like do this, not that sort of a thing. And, as my kids are 13 and 10, like I mentioned, so I am in the middle of kind of their childhood, but um it is different, and it's hard to sort of, like, reconcile that, I think, for everybody, like, what works for one family is not gonna work for the other, and I also think there's a lot of judgment around that, like, "How could
Yes.
we make this decision? How could you do this? How could you" with all the different things that we make decisions about, and I think in general, most families are doing the best they can.
Yes.
And I think that there needs to be a lot more grace and understanding and, not everyone has the same 24 hours in the day. Not everyone has the same resources, whether that's family help, financial support, schedule flexibility, like all of those things. And it's just vastly different for everybody, the
Well, and
experiences.
and then on top of that, I just I say this a lot. I really, really, truly believe there are many, many ways to be a good parent, right? There's not just one right
Yeah.
way to do things. It's not just, and I agree with you entirely. Everybody's circumstances are different, resources, supports, all of those things. But also, we can make different decisions for our children and they're still going to be okay. It's not like if we do it one way and somebody else does it another way, one kid, they're
Yeah.
all just whatever is right for your family, right? Our kids are ultimately going to be okay as long as, like you
Yeah.
said, we're really just doing the best that we can.
Yeah. I think so too. And I think all kids are also really different. And so you have to parent your child, not like
Yeah,
the vow.
absolutely. So, okay, so coming back to, this topic of burnout, you were talking about, stress, burnout, women's hormones. I think a
Mhm.
lot of moms think that it's purely mental exhaustion, which is obviously a huge part of it, but it is so much more than that. And you often talk about the physical and the hormonal side. So, can you
Yeah.
explain that a little bit more and just sort of talk about the connection between stress and burnout?
Mhm.
Women's hormones, all of those kinds of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to describe it as our brain is constantly scanning our environment for threats and dangers and scary stuff. And that used to be in our limbic system, a bear being, or you being chased by a bear or something like that. But now, like I said, the dangers come from reading that, plastics are terrible for your kids, or reading that you need to parent a certain way, or a lot of pressure, or, oh my God, my kid is falling behind, or whatever. It can be urgency, it can be people pleasing, perfectionism, lack of boundaries, lack of, I call it like the safety net. So, family support, financial support, any of those different things. And all of those things, depending on how your brain is perceiving your life, can be detected as a threat. And
Mhm.
when your brain is consistently detecting threats in our life, it's going to change our body chemically. So we know that when we're in that acute fight or flight, that like our pupils dilate or our blood pressure rises. Your body uses a lot of blood glucose from your liver and muscles to make sure that you can run and fight. There's certain parts of our brain that change. So, like the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logical thinking, emotional regulation, motivation, word recall, memory, all of these things is kind of suppressed. Whereas like this amygdala, this big like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, do what's right, get out of the situation is really more activated. And so when you're in that state for a long time, our body changes. Your body is meant to be in that in and out of it throughout the day. So it is a misconception that we need to feel cool, calm, and collected all the time to be out of this state of stress, that we are not supposed to go into fight or flight. We can go into fight or flight. It's perfectly acceptable. For example, even like when you slam on your brakes in the car, like you get that jolt and then your
Mhm.
body's like, okay, nope, crisis averted. We're fine. Go back to normal functioning. But when you're constantly in this state of stress, whether that's from anything that I mentioned, I also think overstimulation and technology is another big area of pushing us into fight or flight consistently. Your body's like, "Oh my gosh, this world is really dangerous for us right now, and we need to fuel the stress response more." And so to have that sustained fueling of that stress response, your body uses more minerals. So we call it like the magnesium burn rate. Sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium are really just like burned through. Your body also uses hormones to do that. So cortisol is our stress hormone, adrenaline is a hormone, and those are part of our stress cycles. But things like estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, testosterone, some of these sex hormones that we talk about more in perimenopause are also used. So if your body's like, oh my gosh, we're in stress all the time and this threat state, we don't really need to ovulate. We can just use progesterone to fuel this cortisol. And so then you start to notice when you're in a state of more, I really hate the word stress because people don't really understand what stress is, but I feel like more this like hyper vigilance, high alert kind of state that then your body, you may start to notice more PMS symptoms. Your cycle might start to change. So longer, shorter, heavier, lighter, which is also perimenopause too. And so the hard part is that these overlap a lot. We're in this mid season of life, late 30s, 40s, and 50s, where you are going through perimenopause and your sex hormones are way more volatile than they were. But also, you're in this era of responsibility where stress, responsibility, pressure, all of that is also really high too. And so they sort of, in a sort of a mean way, overlap. You also will suppress your immune system. You can suppress your digestive system because your body's like, we don't need to deal with that right now. We need to run and fight. Your like neurotransmitters can change. So serotonin and dopamine can start to get low and we start to, be more irritable or anxious. We start to crave food or other coping mechanisms, alcohol, shopping, gambling, sugar, salt, fat, carbohydrates, whatever that might look like. Um, we start not to sleep great. Our energy's all over the place because we're kind of riding this like glucose roller coaster from the fight or flight. And so you can start to see that really every single system in our body can be very much affected by this. Inflammation is very protective. So you hear online in the health world, inflammation, you got to get rid of it. You're puffy and you got to eat anti inflammatory. But inflammation for our body is protective. If you sprain your ankle, your body's going to send inflammation as a healing resource there. And so if you're chronically in a state where your body's detecting that you need more protection, you're probably going to feel puffier and swollen and like your fluid retention and that system is not working as well. And so really, all these things that women come to me for, and you probably hear too, where they're like feeling like they have a laundry list of things going on. Maybe they have chronic pain that could be associated with this too, is really one thing. And so that's more an
Mhm.
empowering thing of like, no, you don't need to see 19 specialists. You don't have 19 systems going wrong in your body. You have one thing and it's not wrong. And I always want to make sure to emphasize that your brain's trying to protect you. It's not that it's working
Mhm.
against you. It's
Right.
really trying so hard to protect you. And so making yourself more of a team with your brain instead of fighting it is really kind of like the first step of understanding, okay, I'm in a protective mode. Thank you so much for trying to protect me, but we are safe. We're in our nice house right now. We're okay.
Well, okay, and so you really I mean, as you were explaining, you said a lot, you were talking about, like, the different systems and things like that, and you were talking about, different ways this could show up, different symptoms that, people might be experiencing, and this idea, of course, that it's not gonna look the same for everybody, right? It's gonna
No.
look different for everybody, but all these different kinds of symptoms could really be pointing to the same thing. And so, I'm curious if there are, from your experience, are there specific symptoms that are maybe like more common? Like, how would a woman know or be able to recognize the most common signs, let's say that hormonal imbalance might be contributing to her burnout?
So I would say when we talk about hormones, again, remember that there's like dozens of different hormones. And so it can be really different. I would say, I'll go back to your question here in a second, but I would say it's really more about how the symptoms behave versus what they are. So when you look, we'll
Mhm.
talk about this in a second, but when you look at, they're called neuroplastic symptoms. And basically that means that your brain is in this protective danger mode and it causes bodily symptoms for you. Um, when you're in that place, symptoms behave very differently than if they are structural, need like traditional medical like treatment for it. So for example, with chronic pain, let's call it back pain. A lot of
Mhm.
people are able to recognize, like, yeah, when I'm stressed, it's a bit worse, or when I'm under a lot of pressure, my back goes out sometimes, or something like that. And sometimes you don't even have to feel under pressure because it's actually that is suppressed. And that's the reason the symptoms are in the first place. But if you look at it that way, it's going to come and go. It's going to ebb and flow. It's going to, and maybe not fully go away, but like, it's worse today than it was yesterday type of a thing. It may change locations. So sometimes it can be like higher, lower, left side, right side type of a thing. And it kind of like switches sides. It can also change like qualities. So it used to be dull and achy. Then it got to, oh, now it's sharp today. Those discrepancies in medical research don't make sense for it to be structural. For example, if you have a sinus infection, it's not really gonna get better until you get antibiotics, if it's an actual bacterial infection, kidney infection, UTIs, those types of things. And so obviously we always wanna rule out the physical with symptoms and make sure, but really the more symptoms you have, the more it leans to, this is a neuroplastic symptom. It might also be like anxiety ebbs and flows all the time. It's dependent on how much danger your brain is perceiving. Dizziness and vertigo can be part of that, so sometimes it comes and goes. So all of it's really more how the symptoms behave than what they actually are, because there really is, like, hundreds of symptoms that can be associated with like neuroplasticity or stress. In terms of like sex hormone stuff, I like to treat it in both ways. So if somebody comes to me and is like, my PMS is horrendous, like I am so irritable and so anxious and can't sleep before my period every single month, I do think, let's bird's eye view, let's look out and see how is the rest of your life. If it's, are you stressed a lot? Do you have a lot of pressure? Are you a perfectionist? Do you feel low grade stress and anxiety the rest of the month and it just really gets bad at this point in the cycle? Let's treat it from both sides. I do think that, that's generally caused from low progesterone, which, like I said, low progesterone can be caused by both perimenopause and stress. And so in those cases, I do think that treating it in both ways. So either using progesterone or herbs or vitamins or something like that to help the sex hormones, as well as also always addressing it from the more fear and preoccupation you have about this. Oh my God, it's coming. I'm going to be so anxious. I hate this. Oh my gosh, it's here. I hate feeling like this. What's wrong with me? Your brain's going to be like, oh my God, this is really scary and dangerous. Quick, like magnify it and be really hypervigilant to that symptom, which in neuroplastic symptoms, we know that fear and preoccupation is like the equation for chronicity. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how you make your symptoms chronic, is by
Mm-hmm.
being scared of them or frustrated with them and having like laser focus on them.
Right, right. Okay. Well, so for a woman who is, having a hard time with this, who's experiencing any of these symptoms, she's coming to, see a specialist, maybe she's coming to see you.
Yep.
What about some things that she could realistically do at home for herself? So a lot of
Yep.
the, people who are listening are very, very busy and they want to take care of themselves, but just have a hard time finding time in their day. So I'm wondering if you can talk about some simple, realistic nervous system regulation tools that a busy mom could fit into her life.
Absolutely. So I think one of the first steps, if it is actually a symptom, so you're not just feeling like you're overwhelmed and frazzled all the time, but it's actually like you have vertigo, you have back pain, you have IBS, you have like an actual symptom. It's really, you want to start with breaking the symptom fear symptom cycle. So basically, stop treating it in a way of like, okay, I need to eliminate all this food, or I need to do this physical treatment. I need to do this because it's a structural problem, and start recognizing, oh my gosh, my brain feels so scared right now that it's giving me this symptom. And I need to treat it as though it is coming from the brain, the emotions versus this structural thing. And so there's a lot of ways that we can do that. There's a lot of resources out there for this, but really breaking the fear around it and understanding why that symptom is there in the first place is critical. I think in general for nervous system regulation, what we want to do, and something that I think all of us can do is, I know this sounds so basic, but really slow down is the first step.
Mhm.
So
Which is
generally
hard.
speaking, it's so hard because when your brain's in this fight or flight, you're like wanting to flee, right? And so everything
Yeah.
feels so chaotic and so crazy and so fast, and we got to get there. And so it really is like going against, I call it what the anxious brain is telling you. So if your brain is like fast, run, slam on the brakes, honk the horn, do all these crazy things, you want to be like, hey, I know you're trying to save my life right now. This is not life saving. If we are even 10 minutes late, not ideal. Someone might get frustrated with us, but it is going to be okay in the long run. It's not
Right.
worth being in this state for this. And so I tell people all the time, you're probably more habituated to run like this at this point. So you're not going to catch it every time. That's fine. We just want to start the process of rewiring your brain to understand that your world is not on fire and you can slow down. And so eating slower, driving the speed limit, walking through your house slower, not yelling at the kids chaotically, not wiping the counter as fast as you can, like really trying to slow down will teach your brain, because your nervous system is 80% nonverbal. So we
Mhm.
can't just be like, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, and continue to do the same things. We have to actually show your brain you are safe. I actually, to give you some context, had a therapist maybe 10 years ago that I went to for, it was a specific neuroplastic symptom. therapist and I went for back pain, got rid of my back pain. Great. The anxiety flooded. That back pain was like an anchor for my anxiety. And so when that left, the anxiety was horrendous. And so then we started working on anxiety. And he was like, okay, you have a choice. You can continue to put tons of pressure on yourself, like self abandon all the time, have perfectionism and people pleasing and do all of that, but you're going to have anxiety. Or you can start to try to unravel some of these virtuous things in your brain to you, and that will help the anxiety, but you cannot have both. And so that like really it hit me. I was like, okay, this is the choice that I have to make. And, ironically, I know you and I have talked about this before. When you work on that stuff, it doesn't mean that you like become a failure and like laying in bed all day. It actually opens up so many more doors. But that's what I thought. I was like, oh my God, I'm just going to lay in
Well,
bed all day.
yeah, and the thing is, what you were talking about a minute ago, and you were talking about slowing down and showing your brain by, changes that you are making in terms of how you move through your day to day, but also you're also talking a lot about like this mindset piece, right? Which is so important. You talk about, this idea of like, if I'm 10 minutes late, it's not ideal, but it will be okay, right? And, giving up perfectionism and all of these things. I think that a lot of times people don't necessarily stop and think about or stop and recognize that
Yeah.
most of the time, like, it's not to say that these things aren't problems. Like, these are might be very real issues that we're dealing with, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the ability to cope with
Yeah.
them, to get support around them, like to move
100%.
through them in a way that, and that we can come out of the other side and we can be okay. And so a lot of times we sort of have this catastrophic fear
Yeah.
that if this bad thing happens, everything is going to crumble, everything is going to fall apart. It's going to be this worst case scenario. And I feel like it's really important to stop and challenge that and recognize that most of the time, like that is just not true. Like that is not the case and we will be okay.
Yeah. No, I think so too. I think, there's so many layers to this and even like perfectionism. I know like we could talk for 3 days on perfection, right?
Yes.
Like it's just
Uh-huh.
there's so many avenues to that. And so it's not like, I can't sit here and be like, okay, you got to give up perfectionism. You got to stop being a people pleaser. You got to slow down. You got to give yourself self-compassion and all will be well because that first off, a lot of people don't want to do that because they feel like this is how they're successful.
Right.
And so it feels very threatening to their self identity, which is what I experienced and didn't understand the difference. And so a lot of it goes back to, how you were raised and when you got accolades and all of these things. And so that's why I always start the process with just slow down. That's all you gotta do.
Mhm.
Like, teach your brain you're not being chased by a bear. Are you bracing all day with your shoulders and your ears and like, "Oh my gosh, I'm waiting for the fight or the punch?" Or are you like, "Okay, we're gonna handle this. This is fine. We're gonna breathe slower," all of that. So I think that really can go a long way. And the other thing that sounds so basic, but is really helpful is, like I said, reminding your body that you're a team. And so symptoms are biofeedback, they're communication to you. And one of the things that we do consistently is we ignore that so much. So, one of the other things that I think is so important is to really trust your impulses. So, needing to pee, eat, drink, move, breathe, all of these things. And our body will subtly give us this biofeedback. And then it gets louder and louder and louder the more that we ignore it. And so, I think also reminding yourself that like you're a team and your body can trust you to do what it needs. If you're tired, rest or go to sleep. And I think that also really helps your nervous system not feel the need to be so hyper vigilant because it can trust you. And so those are like two areas that I start with first with people. Um, just to get like that 80% nonverbal piece, at least in motion.
Okay. Okay. So if we were to talk about, habits, mindset shifts, things like that, that moms can start doing to help with this. So daily habit, slowing down, right? It sounds like that is really a big one for you. What about this mindset shift piece? Like, what would you, this is obviously a much bigger thing. And for a lot of women, it can really be helped to work through and sort of process and explore some of these things. But is there like a very simple mindset shift that you would
Yeah.
encourage a mom to sort of think about and challenge for herself?
So I like to say it as, is this thought coming from your wise brain or your anxious brain? Every thought comes from one or the other. And so an anxious brain, or let me back up. A wise brain thought is going to sound like less of an emergency. Probably should get around to that. That would be great to have done. Oh yeah, I need to do that in a couple days. Gives it more grace, less pressure. An anxious brain is going to sound like an emergency, immediate, urgent, laser focused, oh my God, catastrophic. And that's when we start to get into like the cognitive distortions of like the negativity bias or catastrophic thinking, future telling, mind reading. Oh my gosh, he looked mad at me. Did I do something wrong? Um, those are coming from your anxious brain. And so
Mhm.
I always say, first, let's just catch them. Let's just say, okay, I am working in a lot of anxious brain thoughts now, and it's a dictator driving my car and telling me what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And let's actually teach our brain, hey, we know what you're doing. We don't need you to do this anymore. We can actually listen to the whisper of what is your anxious brain telling you. And it's going to feel, again, this is a lot louder over here, the anxious brain. It's going to feel like it's yelling in your little wide, like this little whisper. But if we can start to pay attention to that, I think that really helps get out of that fight or flight response. Because so many people, this was me too, listen to the catastrophic thought, want to find safety. And so they're Googling things or researching or seeking reassurance or shaming themselves or judging. And all of that's coming from the anxious brain.
Oh,
And so
well,
it fuels it, it keeps it going.
well, and then on top of that, you're talking about like trying to find, going online, trying to find information and things like that, which unfortunately, I think we all know that the internet, you can pretty much find anything that you're looking for.
Anything.
So you're
Yep.
like looking for these things that are going to help you. But a lot
Yeah.
of times it ends up having the opposite effect where really what you're finding is just making all of this 1,000 times worse.
Right. So like if Googling, I Google, I Google when I'm anxious and I Google when I'm not anxious. When I'm not anxious, it might be like, oh my gosh, I wonder what my son's acting funny. I should go to Dr. Becky Good eventually and see if she has any suggestions for this behavior. But it's going to feel like it's not an emergency. If it's coming from your anxious brain, it's going to be like, give me my phone right now. I need to figure this out immediately. I need to fix it. That's an anxious brain type of a thing. And so for so many people, they want the answers of like, do this, not that. But unfortunately, everything comes down to your intention behind it and like the energy of like where it's coming from in your brain. And so you have to get good at deciphering that. Because it's
Okay.
not about what you're doing, like even meditation. If somebody is only meditating when they're anxious and they feel anxious and like, "Oh my god, I gotta go to the corner and meditate. I have to get rid of this and fix it." You're teaching your brain that that anxiety is so terrible and terrifying to you that you can't experience it, and it turns up the volume. Versus someone who meditates, who's like, "Oh my gosh, it feels so good. I wanna meditate at some point today. That would feel really nice today." That's like such a less that's your wise brain talking.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
it just really matters where it's coming from.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. Well, so what would you say is maybe one common belief about health, hormones, self-care, any of those kinds of things that you don't find to be especially helpful, maybe something that you just wish more people would be aware of and really try to let go of?
So I think this is a general thing, but I'm gonna hone it into anxiety specifically.
Okay.
Anxiety is nothing to fix. We come from a culture that feels the need. It's so uncomfortable and so terrifying to some people. And so we want to fix it so bad. But anxiety is your brain's fire alarm to you. And so it's not about fixing it, it's about changing your response to it and teaching your brain that your world is safe through these strategies. And also, obviously, we go way deeper into it in both your work and mine to really figure that out for you. But I struggle with anxiety, like I said. And, when you want to fix yourself or use yourself as like a project, that makes your nervous system so scared.
Well, and anxiety itself, I mean, to your point, is something that is so common, right? It's something that so many people experience. And you were also talking about this discomfort, right, that people feel when they experience anxiety. And One of the things that I tell people a lot is that discomfort, it's unpleasant, but it's not unsafe, right? Like, we can
Yes.
deal with discomfort. Like, we can manage it and get through it and continue to move forward. But there tends to be this idea that we can't handle it, and so we avoid it at all costs. But really, that in itself, I feel like is inaccurate because, again, it's unpleasant. Like, nobody likes to be
Oh,
uncomfortable, but
yeah.
again, it's not unsafe, and I feel like that's a really important distinction.
I think so too. And I think that when you think about that or symptoms in general, it's really not the sensation. So I teach my patients, I'm like, okay, if you're anxious, like let's get into it. Let's get the lay of the land with your anxiety. Where do you feel it? What does it feel like? Does it move? Is it stationary? Is it sharp? Is it dull? Is it in your head or your stomach? What is it doing? And have them actually practice as a technique called somatic tracking where they actually sit with it and like look at it and explore it like they're exploring like snorkeling or something. And they sit in it and I'm like, you just sat in this. You can do this. It's more the fear around it that makes it so debilitating. I also think people also feel like that catastrophic thought around like this is going to be like this forever. That is debilitating.
Mhm.
That's what
Yeah.
makes it. Just take it in the moment and you're like, "Okay, don't love this, but I can get through this moment." Your brain's
Yeah.
like, "Okay, this sucks, but whatever. It's fine."
Well, okay. So for the people who are listening, right, you've really shared a lot of like wonderful, valuable information today. And it's a lot, right? A lot of things to think about and whatnot. So for somebody who just wants maybe one small thing, one small starting point, maybe she doesn't really know where to start to really start
Yeah.
to move forward with this. What would you recommend?
I would say probably look at your anxious brain versus your wise brain. Just self-awareness. Whatever
Mm-hmm.
you're doing, let's have self-awareness in, "Oh, yeah, this is coming from my anxious brain or this is coming from my wise brain." From there, you can build so much. People who are dealing with emotional eating issues or anxiety or overwhelm, or there's so many avenues for this. Perfectionism. We got to have the self awareness first of, yes, I am in fight or flight right now, and I don't need to be. This is not a life threatening situation. And so I always tell people that like the self awareness of it is so critical and so
Yeah.
important in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't agree more with that. So, all right. So, for people who want to learn more about you, they want to learn more about the work that you do, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, so, Instagram's a great place, it's just my name, Ali Damron. I also have a podcast too that Christy's been on before, and we chat about all these things every week, a different honed in topic a little bit more. It's called The Ali Damron Show. You can go to my website, Ali Damron. I have a YouTube channel, Ali Damron, everything's just my name. So all of those places you can kind of search around for topics that interest you around what we're talking about here: hormones, health, holistic health, nervous system. That's pretty much what I talk about every day.
Okay, perfect. So, so I will make sure, as always, that'll all be included in the show notes for anybody who wants to, learn more about you and the work that you do.
Perfect.
Before we wrap up for today, I always like to ask everybody this,
Yeah.
if you could leave the moms listening with one final message, one final piece of advice, what would it be?
Um, I think that no matter where you are right now, I think there's always hope. And I think
Yeah.
that you're probably doing a much better job than you think, even though, again, that catastrophic mean brain probably tells many of us that we're failing on a daily basis. The fact that you're here listening to this, trying, it tells me everything I need to know.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you said that. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people sort of, express this sense of hopelessness and I agree with you in 100%. Like, you're here, you're doing the work, you're listening to the podcast, you're going to your therapist, you're doing more research, whatever it
Yeah,
is that you are doing, like, that speaks volumes.
it
And
does.
I don't think, yes, I agree. I feel like all of these things are I'm glad that you're leaving people with like a sense of hopefulness, because I feel like that is just such an important thing for people to hear. So
Yeah, so much.
yeah. Well, this has
Yeah.
been really wonderful. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about all of this. I feel like you just have so much valuable information. And I always appreciate, people, sharing their time with us for the listeners.
Yeah,
So,
my pleasure.
um, and then as always, for the moms who are listening, if any of this resonates, if you found any of these things that we talked about to be valuable, helpful, please feel free to look up Allie. I'll have all her information in the show notes. And please share this podcast with any other moms that could maybe use some support, because we are all in this together.
We are, for sure.